Hi everyone, I'm Steven Zigman,
And I'm Mike Massinio.
and this is the Weekly Movie Throwdown, a discussion show where each week we dig into a film that fits into our overall monthly theme. This week we're wrapping up One Crazy Night month with a big one that's going to be really fun to talk about, 2004's Collateral, starring Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, directed by the one and only Michael Mann. So it's going to be a really good one. Before we get into that, of course, let's talk a little news.
Yeah, I think the biggest news is that they found a director for James Bond, which I guess we have to mention.
Yeah.
That they picked Denis Villeneuve for moving the franchise forward. Now it's interesting. I read something and I had similar thoughts. You're always trying to pinpoint where they're going to go after where they went last time. By picking someone like him, it seems like they seem to be staying in the same vein of being a little serious. But it's hard to say. I mean, because it can go, but obviously he's a serious filmmaker who makes serious movies,
Yeah.
which is fair. I think there's always a camp of Bond people where some people want it to be realistic and gritty and all of that, but there's other people who remember when it was just kind of fun and a little silly. And I think you're always kind of fighting between those two ideas of what you want it to be. And it certainly seems like they're going for would be going for the more serious by picking him. But who knows? Maybe he's got a different idea up his sleeve. He said he loves Bond, so maybe that means he's loved every permutation of Bond. Maybe his favorite Bond is Timothy Dalton. Who knows? Like, we really don't know for sure. But obviously, if we're just going by a good filmmaker to make movies, you could do a lot worse. So at least it's in good hands, but who knows where it's going.
It'll be really interesting because Amazon is the studio behind it, and they famously have endless cash to make things. So it would be interesting to see a really high budget Bond. I don't know what the budget was on Skyfall or Casino Royale or anything. I mean, they looked amazing because of Roger Deakins working on them. And he's worked with Denis Villeneuve before. So maybe the combination of a ton of money, Denis Villeneuve, and fingers crossed, Roger Deakins, this would be amazing.
Yeah, I have to say, though, I don't think the issue with the last few Bond movies has been the way they looked. Of course, they have looked great. I just think that the storyline, to me personally, was a failure.
Rami Malek was the problem.
Right. It's just I don't like the idea of making one continuous Bond story. I don't love the arc of any of that. I think a lot of it was convoluted. I just thought it misunderstood what made Bond movies fun. And so it really just comes down to the script. I mean, it's almost more important who is going to write this, and if they can figure out a way to understand how to mix that balance, which strangely enough, is kind of what Mission Impossible learned how to do in time as well, to raise the stakes but keep things a little light and fun. Until the last one, which got really, really serious. But the few in between, like your 5, 6, 7, it was a good mix of action, peril, and yet still kind of being funny and fun. And someone's got to find that mix, because the last two Bond movies felt like a dirge, and it's like, I shouldn't be having this little fun watching Bond.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big appeals of all of the Bonds before, these is that they were campy in a way and just fun and light, even though they were kind of serious movies. I mean, they got more serious, I think, with the Dalton stuff, but
even Dalton, I think that people forget that Dalton. I really liked. That's why I brought up Dalton. I actually really liked going back. I really liked his Bond movies because he was a little lighthearted, but also seemed menacing, and I think that's the thing you have to walk. But what I mean is, Bono has a twinkle in his eye almost, where like he knows that that you're a little bit in on the joke, even though everything around you is espionage and serious, and that's the trick. You don't have to make a silly movie, but you have to have a little bit of a lightheartedness where Bond is always a little bit above it. And with Daniel Craig, it's like, I've never seen so much flop sweat on a Bond in my life. And that's not because of him. I mean, clearly that's the part that he was playing. It's not like Daniel Craig was purposely, showing us how hard it is. That was the way the character was written. It's like Bond was constantly a step behind. He seemed exhausted the entire time. It's like, I need my Bond to be a little bit better than this. Just a little bit more fun, a little bit of that twinkle back. That's what we're looking for.
I think it'll depend on the casting too. That's going to play a big role in it. And did you see any of the potential casting for it yet?
I just saw something this morning, actually. I think I lost it, but
Well, I can tell you. So Jacob Elordi is in the running,
right.
but also Tom Holland, which seems kind of crazy. That's a kid Bond to me.
To say he seems a little young, even though he's not that young, but he feels a little young.
Yeah, I don't know that would be a good fit for it. But um, what if Daniel Craig came back as his Benoit Blanc character, like that tone? That would be more Bond than what we've seen over the past few. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Denis Villeneuve is great. I can't think of a single comedic moment in any of his films, but you know, it has potential. I mean, it'll look good. I think it'll have a great story, whatever it ends up being. Just what will the tone be? So,
Yeah. The only other thing that jumped out at me, just because we've been talking about this for weeks now, is that looks like the California's government finally passed that tax credit program where they more than doubled the tax credits to try to bring production back to California. Um, I think it's great. I also think it speaks to the moment where, I mean, 6 months ago it looked like this wasn't going to happen,
right.
but I think there's been so much movement in things going away from California. And I think everybody realized that we're kind of at a crisis point in terms of California no longer being the place where people actually make Hollywood things. So everyone seems to have turned around, passed easily in the what do you call that? Parliament or whatnot. It's not a parliament. What the hell do you call it?
Congress,
Yeah, there you go. And the state Congress. They
state
passed it. They
Congress.
passed it. Really easily. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think good sign. I think California needs to take seriously that no one wants to film there anymore.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if it's enough. I know that, the industry is obviously looking for more and more tax credits, but it seems like a pretty significant chunk. And yeah, hopefully it'll bring production back. Even some of the studios are relocating to Las Vegas. I think we mentioned before, like Warner Brothers is setting up an outpost there. And, uh, when you have the studios actually moving elsewhere,
Right.
that's a bad sign. So hopefully this is enough of an incentive to bring them back.
Yeah, what I learned from reading this, which I actually didn't know, is that this puts the cap at 750 million, but
Right.
New York and Georgia, it's uncapped. Like the tax incentives are actually uncapped, which I didn't know. I didn't know New York and Georgia were the only two states to have that, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Again, that makes it like, is this far enough? Like,
Right.
is that going to be enough of an incentive? So, but, if you're a small production, that's probably, you're probably going to get a good break. So hopefully at least smaller things will start filming there. We'll see. So the only things I have for this week are kind of piggybacking on the James Bond story in that it's a week of IP announcements that are kind of mind blowing to me. It's been announced that Aaron Sorkin is writing and directing a sequel to The Social Network, which I think can either go, in the right direction or the wrong direction. It'll be interesting to see that story without David Fincher.
Right. Well, what I heard as well is that Jesse Eisenberg is not connected yet, and to me, you have to get him back. I
Yeah,
really believe that you can't have someone else come in and now play Mark Zuckerberg. I think you have to get him.
yeah. That is going to be crazy if it's not Jesse Eisenberg. The other thing is that in what seems to be kind of a string of going to the well with the greatest hits, Mel Brooks is now developing, also for Amazon, a series, as I understand it, called Very Young Frankenstein. And this is on the heels of the announcement of Spaceballs 2
Uh-huh.
weeks ago. Uh, Last year or the year before, he did History of the World Part 2. So he really has a collection of IP of his own that he can lean into. He's 99 years old now. I didn't realize he was that old.
Yeah.
But it seems like he's kind of going back to his greatest hits and revamping them
I mean,
maybe
look,
on his way out.
we know how I feel about rehashing old things, but if you're going to be 100, Once you get to be 100, you're allowed to go back. You can go do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. Someone will only give you money to do it. I'm not interested in any of these projects.
Yeah.
I didn't like History of the World Part 2. I have no desire to see a sequel to Spaceballs. I don't want to watch a Young Frankenstein prequel. But you get yours, Mel Brooks. I'm perfectly happy with that. Someone will enjoy it, and it works for me. I think once you pass 80, if someone wants to give you money to do anything, you should take it.
I mean, Norman Lear did a similar thing
Right.
when he got up there doing his greatest hits. There's a Patton Oswalt bit where he talks about turning 100, and he's like, "You should be president for a day if you turn 100. Like, you can do whatever you want in this country when you're 100 years old. Doesn't
I
matter what it
I
is."
agree with that in some ways. Yeah, because yeah, my dad's getting up there, and there's that fine line where doctors are telling him to do or not do things to stay healthy, but you're like,
Right?
it's like you're in your 80s at this point, whatever. Like it's all house money at this point. Like how
Yeah.
healthy do you want to be versus actually enjoying what you're doing? It's like eat some pie. Like it's hard to know what the mix is.
I have a great uncle who celebrated his 100th birthday last year,
Uh,
and we went to the party for him. And he was actually similar to the Patton Oswalt thing. He was made mayor of his town for a day,
oh wow.
but he could, there was nothing he could really do uh, in that capacity. But it was just really funny because the amount of 100-year-old birthday cards is so limited that everybody basically got the same card for the guy. It was really fun to see. But yeah, and this guy's still around, so it says my fingers are crossed for my genes.
There's a really funny joke in there somewhere where you turn 100 and they make you mayor for a day, and then it turns out like this person's thoughts are just super dark, and they just try to do some
Yeah,
terrible things in their town over the course of one day.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's how the purge began.
Right.
All right, well, that's it for news. Let's jump into talking about Collateral. This is a 2004 film, Michael Mann. Up front, I think it's fun for us to say that this is really kind of the apex of this run for Tom Cruise. And to see where it goes, go back and listen to our show last week where we talk about Night and Day from 2010, where it's like the deepest valley in his career coming down from the highest high. So it's going to be interesting in this sort of accidental Tom Cruise double feature to look at the two extremes of his career. And he's just riding high when Collateral comes out. And for good reason. I mean, he has a great run of films, and this one is no different.
Yeah.
I love this film.
It's also, if you want to get into it, I think it's almost a peak for both him and Michael Mann. If they're both
Yeah.
on mini heaters, because after Heat is kind of the culmination of a lot of things that Michael Mann had been working on. And then 4 years later, he puts out, I mean, my personal favorite Michael Mann movie, which was The Insider. I think that's a very underrated movie. I was really moved by it. I thought it was excellent. And then 2 years later, puts out Ali, which I really liked as a movie. I think brings out one of Will Smith's best performances. I think it looks amazing. I thought it was a fascinating movie. It's not perfect by any means, but I thought it was really effective. And that's where he first works with Jamie Foxx. And then he ends up bringing Jamie Foxx into Collateral, and then the next movie, Miami Vice. But, you know, I think based on how we know everyone feels about Miami Vice in a lot of ways, it's gained a little more stature as the years have gone on. But that definitely kind of ended the mini heater of Heat, Insider, Ali, and then Collateral kind of being the peak Michael Mann period. But also, I think after Collateral, you can see why he moved on to something else, like going to Miami and going back to Miami Vice, because Collateral is kind of like the apex of Michael Mann LA movies. I don't think he could do anything more with LA, because Collateral feels like as Los Angeles a movie as you can possibly make, and only someone like Michael Mann, who's obsessed with LA in general and California, could make it the way he makes it, just finding every little corner to shoot and make a movie that feels so much like a Los Angeles movie that I think he realized he had done everything he could do. He's like, I got to find a different place to go now.
Yeah, and we'll have a lot to say about just how this is shot and all the nuances of that. And I would say that this is almost it's like an early peak for Jamie Foxx. I mean, he wins an Oscar this year for Ray.
Yeah, 2004 is a hell of a year for Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
Two really
And
varied performances, both excellent. I'll let you in a little secret though. Uh, I kind of like Robin Williams. I don't really think Jamie Foxx is that funny. Like, I don't particularly love him as a comedian. I never have. As an actor, I think he's one of the best, honestly, that we have. He's done some really great parts. I think he's done a lot of varied roles. I think he's really kind of underrated. I don't think people appreciate like the work that he does on screen. But I've never really thought he was funny. Even going back to In Living Color, when he came into the cast back in the 80s, I thought the show got much worse when he became a cast member and they started focusing on him. It was much funnier before he showed up.
that's interesting because I am not a fan at all.
Really?
He really doesn't appeal to me, and I don't know why. I feel like the way he carries himself for some reason, like this particular performance feels a little less so, but everything after this, I don't know. I really don't. He doesn't appeal to me as an actor or as like a character. That's not to discredit his ability. I think he's very good, and he does do a lot of different things, but for some reason, he just kind of gets to me. I don't
That's
know.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, we've all got our things, but yeah, I just appreciate that he can kind of do anything you throw at him. But because again, we were talking about 2004, he makes Breaking All the Rules, which not a very good movie. Makes Collateral, makes Ray, but he also appears as Black Tony Blair in the Chappelle Show sketch. Remember the Black Bush sketches?
Yeah, I do.
Going back and rewatching those sketches now is incredible
Yeah.
because it feels like we're literally living through like Black Bush, but that's neither here nor there. But going back and watching that was great. But yeah, he played Black Tony Blair in the Chappelle Show sketch, so he was everywhere, doing everything. But no, I mean, I think he was great in Dreamgirls. I think, yeah, I mean, obviously in Django Unchained. I even liked White House Down. We discussed our White House explosion movies. I preferred White House Down. I think partially because of Jamie Foxx. So yeah, maybe I just like Jamie
Wow.
Foxx
Interesting.
as an actor. Yeah.
Yeah, but doesn't Gerard Butler supersede Aaron? Wasn't it Aaron Eckhart in that one? Oh no,
Yeah.
was Aaron Eckhart? No,
Aaron
it was.
Eckhart played the president in the.
But I'm thinking of Channing Tatum, right? He was the Secret Service guy,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. He's a good actor. For some reason, just doesn't appeal to me. I did think he was great in Ray, just because that's a character who seemed aligned with what seems to be Jamie Foxx's personality. I mean, I don't know the guy, so it's hard for me to say. But yeah, I don't know. Just not my cup of tea, and that's okay. But who is my cup of tea is Tom Cruise, and he is amazing in this film. And one of the things I realized is that this is a lot like Night and Day. And here's my case. Tom Cruise is a life coach in both of these movies. He's just like a life coach who has some questionable tactics, but the Jamie Foxx character, the Cameron Diaz character, very similar in that they're basically unlocked by Tom Cruise.
Right.
And I just started thinking, like, he just brings that to every movie, right? Like, he can't help himself.
Yeah, whether on screen or behind the scenes, he does it, right? Because there are many actors that said they worked with him and they learned how to eat right or a workout regimen or how to attack the script or whatever it is. So yeah, whether he's doing it in front of or behind the camera, like I said, that is Tom Cruise's basically his life now. He's just a movie life coach guru who comes out of cryogenic freeze, eats popcorn, changes people's lives, and then disappears again. That's what he does now.
I was reading about his diet, and he doesn't eat meals. He eats 15 snacks per day. That's how he eats.
I don't even know what to say.
Like 6 of them are popcorn, right. Apparently, according to all the social media I've seen lately.
That's right. But yeah, you're totally right. And obviously, and the word and someday also comes into both movies.
That's right. Yeah.
The idea of someday code for never. They don't say it as explicitly in this, but they kind of do.
Yeah.
They have that great scene in the cab towards the end.
Yeah, where he believes that Jamie Foxx's character Max is just going to continue to have this dream, and it's going to get him through being addicted to daytime television on his Barca lounger when he retires.
Right.
And
I think that's a great scene, and yeah, it's like cards on the table. And I think that in that scene, you learn something, and you also understand because the question throughout the movie is, why doesn't Vincent just take Max out? A lot of opportunities to do it, a lot of situations, and he doesn't, and he even saves his life. And it's like that's
Mhm.
the continual question. But I think in that moment, you kind of start to understand why he doesn't. And you're right; it's because in some ways he's taken him in and decided that he's going to somehow change his life for whatever the reason may be. Um,
Yeah,
and that
and
and
that's interesting because I, Tom Cruise just seems like a Terminator. He's like this killer who has a job to do. He executes it. I kept thinking about The Killer when I was watching this because I was thinking of like, how would the Michael Fassbender character handle this situation versus the way Tom Cruise is doing it? And I think, we talked about briefly Jack Reacher and how he has no charisma in that. And that's why it maybe doesn't work as well as his other films. And in this, he's like a killer with charisma. He still has that
yeah, he has
charisma.
more charisma than this. But so I think a lot of things when I was watching this, and you're right, and it's hard to not be obsessed with Tom Cruise in some ways when you're watching this. But knowing what comes in the next couple of years, because what was shocking about this movie was watching him play someone who was so obviously a sociopath, like and remorseless, and even his smile becomes from being charming to menacing. There's a couple of moments when he smiles in the movie, you're like, oh, like that's kind of creepy, which you never ever feel when you see Tom Cruise smile, right?
Yeah,
And so, one, it really does showcase what a good actor he is because he does come off as just menacing and careless and sinister in some ways. But you think it's very out of character for him. And flash forward to the following year when he's talking to Matt Lauer or whatever, and you suddenly get that flash from him in real life, and you're like, "Oh, like how close is Vincent to real life Tom Cruise, like in this period of time?" So it's really hard not to think about those things, and I try hard not to think about an actor's real life versus their movie characters. But it's really hard not to do that watching
yeah.
Collateral now. But of course, whatever that person was, whether he has moved on from it or he's just learned to bury it again, we get no glimpse of that anymore from him at all.
Right. It's interesting because I was on Netflix the other day and it served up to me like things that are leaving soon. And one of them was Going Clear, the Alex Gibney Scientology documentary. So I watched it again. Because I'm fascinated by Scientology and like cults in general, but Scientology in particular is just really fascinating to me. And you can see, that period in like 2003, 2004, he becomes the guy for Scientology. And it's really insightful because it leads up to that couch moment and that whole year of 2005 where he's like basically become persona non grata. And he's just really, really invested in Scientology. They have like they give him an award as like top Scientologist or something. And they're really just relying on him to be the face of the religion. And so that bleeds over. And in all of these interviews you see with him or when he's accepting awards from David Miscavige, it's that serious cruise that you see when it takes that turn as Vincent. And even a little bit when they're in Salzburg in Night and Day. Like you see that come out, and it seems like he's like that all the time, at least when it comes to Scientology.
Right, right.
So that's really interesting.
And yes, I
Yeah.
just couldn't help thinking it's like, are we getting more of a glimpse into the real Tom Cruise in Collateral than we actually ever thought that we were? And yeah, so yeah, it brings up some weird thoughts.
Well, I mean, some of the things they talk about him being complicit in or doing in that documentary sort of make him seem almost Vincent-esque, which is like who's to say? But
Right.
uh, all of that aside,
Yeah.
separate the man from the art,
Right.
and
Right. And that's the thing with Tom Cruise. With a lot of actors and especially him, you try very much to do that. But yeah, this period right here, your 2004 to 2010, is really the point where it becomes almost impossible to do that. And so, going back and revisiting it, you remember all these things you kind of put aside, and you're like, oh yeah, this is really creepy, a creepy time.
It's hard I've been thinking about it a little bit, and even Magnolia, which is my favorite film ever at the moment anyway, uh, he's Frank T.J. Mackey, but he's still Tom Cruise. Like, can you ever lose him? Even in Tropic Thunder, I mean, he's still Tom Cruise. Like, it's almost impossible for him to be lost in a role, I think. And that's okay. I mean, that's what a movie star is, I guess. They be themselves more than somebody else. And that's what sells tickets, and that's what makes the film. Like, you build it around the movie star, not the character. And
Right.
as much as he is still Tom Cruise, this is a departure for him. Does not play a straight up villain very often, if ever, and so it's hard to connect that, like, Tom Cruise, because he's still Tom Cruise being a villain, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
just really fascinating.
I do think if he gets lost in any role, this is probably it. And we well, for those that don't, I mean, you and I, we're aware how insane Michael Mann is in terms of preparation and everything else. And if he had all of this, usually Tom Cruise has a lot of work on his characters, but in this case, Michael Mann brought almost all of this to him. Like, he had the entire backstory of Vincent. He had already shown him a sketch of exactly what he was going to look like, to the facial hair and the suit. Like the idea was, I love this. We read these little things where it's like the suit, it's like it's supposed to look foreign, but not necessarily European foreign. Like, he got it in a Middle Eastern country or something like that. Like, this is the level of detail of what Michael Mann wanted. So you have the idea
Right.
that he is exotic, but not European exotic, a different kind of exotic,
Yeah.
which only adds to more confusion as to who he is and where he's coming from. So,
I
uh,
wonder if that is the same uh, backstory for the suit when Neil McCauley wore it in Heat, because he wears a very similar suit, the Robert De Niro
right.
character. So I wonder if that's like a Michael Mann thing. And also, Al Pacino's name is Vincent Hanna in Heat. So I think Michael Mann has a thing for gray suits and characters called Vincent. But yeah, might as well talk about Michael Mann and his meticulousness, because you mentioned Vincent's backstory. None of this has any relevance in the film, but Michael Mann developed a backstory that took Vincent back to 2 years old, growing up in Gary, Indiana, and learning to love jazz. Because this, as we discover in the film when Tom Cruise talks about it, his father was abusive. So that's why he sort of found jazz and moved into that as a way to get away from his father. But that level of detail for Michael Mann. And another thing that he did is he created an entire business plan for Island Limos that took months to prepare. Like, he and Jamie Foxx basically started a business without starting a business, just to know what it would be like. And that goes to the idea of practicing with live rounds. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, the
if
crew said
he
he worked harder in this, even though he'd used guns before. The level of preparation he did with this and using live ammunition is something he'd never done before. But so, side note, if we're talking about this now, you're talking about all the preparation Michael Mann had done. So Michael Mann did not write this script. It's
right,
credited to Stuart Beattie. And when you look at the filmography of Stuart Beattie, it's hard to square that with with Collateral in some ways. I mean, no offense to him, he did basically create the story that led to Pirates of the Caribbean. He didn't write the script, but he wrote the story. So obviously, he's probably wealthy from that alone. But he made 30 Days a Night, which is pretty decent movie. But he's an Australian filmmaker. But if you look at it, he wrote G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra, and you're like, it's hard to square that. And then you learn all this stuff that Michael Mann did in preparation for the movie. And the question becomes, how much of the original script actually ends up being made? And I tried to find this, and I can't really find anything about it, because Michael Mann's not credited as a writer, but it feels to me like he busted a ton of work post
yeah,
script to get to bring this to life.
he. Well, Stuart Beattie's script was set in New York, and Mann is responsible for moving it to Los Angeles. if you look in the producer credits, Frank Darabont is a
I did see
producer.
that, yeah.
He did a pass on the script before it went to screen. So I would assume Frank Darabont is the one who did a lot of what we see on screen.
Which leads to the other question. When I did see Frank Darabont's name, and of course, it reminds me how little work he's actually done. And, but then it makes me wonder, like, is if he's producing on the side, how much is he rewrite? Like, how much of that is he doing? Kind of script doctoring, producing, bringing things to life, but not actually directing anymore. Because someone as talented as he showed himself to be, I can't imagine he's just doing nothing now. But he's not really making a lot of films anymore. But
Right.
So that's another. Well, maybe we could do a whole pod one day about what the hell Frank Darabont's doing.
Yeah, if he's doing nothing, maybe he'll come on the show.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's fascinating because it clearly seems like something got in between the original script and the movie that we see. There's no doubt about that.
What you hear is that Stuart Beatty had the idea for a sociopath being in the backseat of a cab when he was in the backseat of a cab going from Sydney Airport to somewhere. And then he took it to a producer friend. And then I would imagine, it just got the ball rolling from there and it became something totally different. I mean, that's still the core of it, but you have all these people involved. And I think it's interesting to look at everybody who was on board with this at one point or another from the filmmaking standpoint, like actors aside, and we can talk about like 100 actors and cast in different things with this, but it was originally set to be shot by Mimi Leder, who
Oh, really?
is, in that time, she's making like The Peacemaker and Deep Impact. So she's probably a good fit, for this kind of film. She drops out, gives it over to Steven Spielberg's cinematographer, actually, Janice Kaminsky, who has directed a few things, but is mostly known for being a DP on things like Lincoln and like a lot of the stuff that Spielberg does. He can't do it, so it kind of goes back in the pile at Paramount for a while until Russell Crowe comes across it. And then he's the one who has the idea. He wants to be Vincent, and he brings Michael Mann on board. But Michael Mann is actually producing The Aviator at the time.
Right.
So he's developing that and gets like really interested in Collateral instead. So he offers The Aviator to Scorsese and Milos Forman. Obviously, Scorsese takes it. But Scorsese was also offered this, along with Steven Spielberg, along with Spike Lee.
I'll tell you what. I mean, leaving the movie in New York and having Scorsese or Spike Lee direct it, I would love to see. It's almost like when I say to you the idea of making Batman movies, I would love to just see one filmmaker make their version of Batman. I would love to see like every filmmaker make their version of Collateral. Like in the city they're known for, like Richard Linklater making a version of Collateral in Texas, Spike Lee making a version of Collateral in New York, like whatever it is. Like I would love to see what a hyper city centric filmmaker puts that movie in their city and just makes it. I think that would be fascinating.
Well, it's not Collateral, but you almost get that in a sense this year because 2 months later, Crash comes out, directed by Paul Haggis. It goes on to win one of the most controversial Best Picture Oscars ever. But those are very much two tales of the same city. So that's interesting to watch them. Not that you would ever want to watch Crash, but to watch them back to back like that would be just two very different visions of Los Angeles. So that might be an interesting exercise. Paul Haggis also famously an ex-Scientologist, so he was in the documentary. But yeah, it lands with Mann. He loves it. I mean, he really loves it because the things he's been doing are sort of bigger pictures, like Ali, kind of Ali up against the government, Heat even to a degree, and he wants to sort of like condense everything and really does that here, all set in one night, two characters.
And it allows him to explore the digital shooting, which he's also moving towards, which really comes to fruition in Miami Vice. But he shoots, they said, like 80% of this movie in digital, all the outside sequences. And it also allows him to shoot the final sequence in the building in complete darkness, which I thought was interesting. So he's figuring out ways to so yeah, you're right. I can see him being fascinated by this too, making a smaller movie. It allows him to test out some new things that he's working on, which he then brings to the huge budget of Miami Vice, for better or worse. But yeah, it's interesting in a lot of ways.
Yeah, this is the first full length film to be shot on the Thomson Viper film stream camera, and there wouldn't be a ton of them going forward. Miami Vice was also shot on it, as was Zodiac. So you really have Fincher and Mann, two big leaders in the digital movement early on, shooting on this camera. But it kind of had limitations, and then Red came out, a couple years later, so everybody shot on that. But yeah, I mean, the look of this film is crazy in 2025,
Yeah.
and I watched it on this beautiful 4K edition that Paramount just put out, and the transfer is incredible. I mean, you can really see what the digital couldn't do if you compare it to like watching it on Blu-ray, because I had both here. So there's a lot lacking with the digital, like the blacks and things like that. But even though that's the case, that sensor makes it a lot easier to shoot at night. So it worked out. And of course, Mann, being as meticulous as he is, had all of these reasons for how the digital looks better with the marine layer coming in this time of year over Los Angeles, and how like the sulfur vapor lights look different against the marine layer on digital. And you just have to admire that level of precision, right?
I mean,
It's
it's
amazing.
precision or insanity, depending on how you
Yeah.
look at it. But yeah, I was listening to one part where they were talking about, like, I think that one sequence in the beginning where they're in the alley, that's not even one alley. This is like multiple, like different angles or different alleys, and he knows all of them. And so it's like 5 alleys in one scene because he's obsessed with like the way everything looks in a particular way. Like, yeah, he knows Los Angeles better as well as any filmmaker probably does, but it's just like he's a lunatic. So there's all these little nooks and crannies he's aware of that no one's even seen before.
It's pretty amazing. Most of that stuff probably doesn't matter, to be
No,
honest.
it really doesn't matter.
But I love that he does it. God bless him. We need people who are that meticulous about their work,
It makes
I
a
think.
lot of sense how he ends up making a movie about Ferrari. We'll just put it that way. It just feels like
Yeah.
Ferrari is the perfect companion piece to someone like him.
And that pairs well with Cruise, who's known for preparing. I even watched an interview with Cruise where he's like, Michael brought me this whole backstory of Vincent. He's like, I usually do that.
Right.
And so, it worked out really well. Jamie Foxx went to driving school at like a racetrack. Tom Cruise was actually tasked with learning how to get in and out of places by being unseen. So he would pose as like a FedEx delivery guy and follow people who worked on the film and tag them with Post-its. So to let them know that he got them. That's amazing. But I love the
I'm
details like
almost
that.
surprised that they haven't worked together more
Yeah.
because they both seem like crazy people obsessed with movies. So, like Jamie
In
Foxx
a good
working
way.
with Michael Mann 3 times is interesting to me, which proves there must be a little bit of that in Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
But it's shocking that he only worked with Tom Cruise once because it just feels like they are the perfect combination.
Even Mark Ruffalo, who plays Detective Fanning, said that his first scene, they did literally 80 takes, and all he did was make a phone call to, say that somebody was killed. 80 takes. So Michael Mann, David Fincher has this reputation too. And that's interesting about digital. It's like these two
I
guys
was
are
just going to
such
say,
proponents of
allowing
that.
those two guys to start using digital feels
Yeah.
like the worst combination ever. You need film. You need to be able to learn how to film and pay for it. These guys need a limit.
But think of the money the studio must save on that, because they were doing 80 takes before digital, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So
So you mentioned Mark Ruffalo, so that's a good segue in talking about the cast, which is, I mean, really something. But let's get right off the top here. Opening sequence of the movie, Jason Statham out of nowhere, friend of the
yeah,
pod. Like, I couldn't believe it. I totally forgot he was in this. Why he's only in it for 30 seconds, I have no idea.
but it's such a good 30 seconds.
What is going on with that? There should be a totally separate movie, a sequel to Collateral, about what the hell Jason Statham does.
Well, Michael Mann just wrote a sequel to Heat like 30 years later, so maybe we'll get that story. You never know.
Yeah.
Or was that one of Statham's characters? And if it was, which one was it?
That's a good. So many
That's a
questions.
transporter?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. That was yeah. And you got Debbie Mazars in the cab. So right out of the gate, you're like, oh, like just people popping up everywhere. We talked about No Country for Old Men. So I mean, Javier Bardem shows up in this before everybody assumes or talks about No Country for Old Men being really his first American movie. Well, not the case. I mean, he was already in this, so he pops up here, and really menacing. It's interesting to have just seen No Country for Old Men, and then watching this, where you have two menacing characters, so to speak, but in completely different vibes.
Interesting note that he is apparently as meticulous as Michael Mann, because he has that one scene. Javier Bardem is Spanish, and he's supposed to have a Mexican accent on his Spanish. So he's, even though there's one scene, he spent 3 months learning that accent for this film. So Michael Mann just must bring it out in people, right? Unless Tom Cruise is life coaching everybody, and one of the tenets of the life coaching is preparation.
It's possible.
Somebody who didn't prepare very much is Peter Berg, who's kind of in and out, and just straight up Peter Berg, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, watching Peter Berg in this movie, you realize why he went into directing. Because he's fine. He's fine as an actor, but you're right. He's kind of he does one thing, he does it pretty well, but turned out to be an excellent director.
Yeah.
Maybe he took some notes from Michael Mann, because you could definitely see Michael Mann's influence on Peter Berg's direction, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, visually for sure. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you were talking about the cast. We have a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, Bruce McGill, who's kind of one of those guys who shows up in everything. He's got a nice few minutes in this movie.
Did you know who was originally in that role?
No.
This makes perfect sense. You either get one or the other. Dennis Farina was going to be in that role.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
But it's worth talking about all the people who were attached to Max and Vincent at one point or another. We mentioned Russell Crowe, kind of the early Vincent. And when he was on board, the first person they went to for the Max role, and this blows my mind, again, Adam Sandler. So Adam Sandler was the first person approached for the Max role. And this makes much more sense to me than Night and Day, because this is 2 years out from Punch Drunk Love. And I think, at that point, he seemed like somebody who could do this role. Like Jamie Foxx, comedian turned actor, Sandler doing the same thing. Now, could Sandler contain the rage enough to be as sort of passive as Jamie Foxx needed to be before he was empowered in this? I don't know. But that's just interesting that Sandler was like the guy for a while,
That's really interesting.
And he and Cruise have never worked together, but apparently they almost did a million times.
Wow.
It has to happen. Happy Gilmore 3.
It would be something. Yeah, so we didn't even mention Jada Pinkett Smith yet.
Right.
I don't know who else had looked at this role before she did, but she'd obviously already worked with Michael Mann and Ali. But we're talking about heaters, mini heaters. And this is a fascinating time for her, because, she makes Ali and she makes Collateral, but she's also making the Matrix sequels at the exact same time.
Right.
So she's doing a ton of work here. So between 2001 and 2004, she worked exclusively with Michael Mann and the Wachowskis. So, that must have been a hell of a time for her.
Yeah, I don't know how the Wachowskis run their set. I can't imagine they're as meticulous as Michael Mann and
I don't know though. I mean, if there's any point where they were going to be meticulous is with the Matrix, where they're building this. I mean, this is when things get hairy with the Matrix. They're building out the world, and regardless of how you feel about the sequels, a lot of work went into those two movies.
That's true. Because it's made up, I don't know if there's a job that she could go study for 3 months.
That's fair.
I didn't read very much about her role in this. I didn't see anybody potentially cast in it, but I assume she had to go litigate cases or something for 6 months before.
She definitely worked with a lawyer. That much I know, that she went and what's the word? Shadowed some lawyers.
Yeah, that makes sense. As did Mark Ruffalo. He went with Vice Detectives, and that's actually where he got his look from,
Yeah.
which
But
is so cliche, but I guess it's true.
oh, I was watching it last night with my son, and what I realized is that I had the exact same earring that Mark Ruffalo wears in this movie
Oh yeah,
when I was in my early 20s, which of course kind of horrified my son that I had an earring at all. But we won't get into that. That was just those some lost years. We'll forget about that.
yeah. Oh man,
But yeah, it's funny. I was thinking you said the preparation being done, and it's like I'm sure that Michael Mann figured out a way to go to like some small town and get Jada Pinkett Smith to actually prosecute a case. Like he worked that out where she was able to go and just take care of it.
yeah.
Would not be surprising.
So a couple other people that were in the lead roles. Stuart Beatty's original want for Max was Robert De Niro, which seems like previously treaded territory for him as Travis Bickle. It's almost like obvious, but the studio wanted somebody younger, so makes perfect sense. Like you don't want to see that, but Ed Norton was offered both roles as both Vincent and Max.
And maybe he turned it down because he couldn't actually play both roles. Maybe he wanted to be both guys. He wanted to film it with a green screen and play both roles at the same time.
Yeah,
I could see that.
But coming off of Fight Club, where he's essentially two characters,
right.
Cuba Gooding Jr. was also in talks for the Max role.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, Michael Mann didn't want it because they'd already worked together on Jerry Maguire. So
right,
I don't why that was a problem.
In some ways, that would have been really interesting because they had worked together in a completely different way. Where Tom Cruise was also his life coach in Jerry Maguire would have been an interesting inverted twist on that.
So Russell Crowe, we mentioned, was the
Just
original
speaking of Russell Crowe,
Vincent.
because you brought him up, and I mentioned this last week that I was reading the Edward Zwick book, and the whole thing about Last Samurai, he talks about working with Tom Cruise, but he mentions that in the script for Last Samurai was going around that Russell Crowe contacted him, and he wanted to be in the movie. I don't know if you remember this, but he wanted to play the samurai. And all I remember, this is why it's fun to listen to the audiobook, because what Ed Zwick's comment on it, he's like, the mind reels. That was his response to that. And I just thought that was so funny. But that's like where Russell Crowe was in that moment where he's like, yeah, I could play a Japanese samurai. Like that's definitely something I should tackle.
Yep.
Anyway.
I love Russell Crowe. So he dropped out of this because he was already committed to something called Eucalyptus, which is kind of like an Australian-based film, I guess, with Nicole Kidman. And that's kind of interesting.
Maybe Stuart Beatty was involved in that too, because he's an Australian filmmaker. I know he's made a couple of things with Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman. So who knows?
Could be. DiCaprio was in talks,
of course.
Ended up doing The Aviator instead. So Travolta also. Don't know why that didn't work out, but
I can totally see Travolta as Vincent, honestly. But he's already played a character named Vincent as well, so maybe that wouldn't work.
Yeah. I could see him as Max. I mean, I could see, the only other thing that I saw was that Fanning was offered to Val Kilmer, and he was like deep into it, but had to leave because of the shooting schedule of Alexander. So, so Oliver Stone strikes again. That's not
total. Again, side note, but in things I'm thinking about is people missing out on parts, and come back to Tom Cruise again. I was watching this TV show called Sherlock and Daughter, which is pretty interesting. That's not the point. The point is that Doug Ray Scott is in it, and he plays Moriarty in the show. And every time I see him, I just cannot help but think that because Mission Impossible 2 went over in its shooting schedule, he had to walk away from playing Logan in the X-Men. He had to walk away from playing Wolverine. And so he lost out on Wolverine, which is how Hugh Jackman gets cast, changes his entire life. And now Doug Ray Scott is playing Moriarty in a TV version of Sherlock Holmes. And I'm like, good God. Like, I just wonder if sometimes he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's like, I can't believe this.
That's a bad decision.
Not his fault, though, in a way. Like, he committed to Mission Impossible 2, and the shooting schedule shifted. And so it wasn't really his fault.
But he's really, like, outside of the AI entity, like the least interesting Mission Impossible villain, right? So that's a lose lose right there. I mean,
That
you're
one really
committed this
hurts.
thing, yeah.
There's been a lot of talk lately because the last Mission Impossible, which is your favorite, and everybody puts number 2 as the last. And I'm sorry, one of these days we'll have this conversation. I will go to bat for Mission Impossible 2. Much like we're talking about the James Bond stuff, it's like, I know it's the worst of them, but it's also the most fun by far. Like, it's like Rocky 3. I will watch 2 more than any of the others because it is the most fun. The
Right.
last 30 minutes of Mission Impossible 2 are the dumbest, most fun of any Mission Impossible movie, period.
It's true. That's the John Woo one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How is that not going to be fun?
Anyway, we went off pretty far at a tangent there. Sorry.
That's okay. One note that I wanted to make is that uh, to me, Vincent in this has like Tyler Durden energy when he's talking to Max about Rwanda, or he's talking. There's something he says later in the film that I can't remember what it is, but or like the Barca Lounger thing. Like he has this kind of nihilist approach, but it's like quippy and fun. And I couldn't help but think of Tyler Durden, which makes it interesting that Ed Norton was in the
Yeah.
talks to do this. So,
And of course, makes you wonder why Vincent hasn't become a like a online culture person now, where they're not chasing like being next Vincent. They've already adopted American Psycho, so I figure
yeah,
Vincent's got to be coming up behind that.
yeah, he's due for
He's going to
sure.
be the next Avatar to aspire to.
Yeah. Oh, that's upsetting. But he's such an interesting character. I mean, we've talked details of it. I just want to dig into like the themes and the characters a little bit. But he he's just so interesting because, like I was mentioning, the killer earlier, and thinking about how Fassbender would play this. And for somebody who's so anonymous, he just seems like lonely to me. Like he's eager to have conversation,
Yeah.
which kind of goes against maintaining that anonymity. And like one of the things Michael Mann wrote out for him is that he basically lives on the island that Roy Miller lives on in Night and Day, like in Thailand or something, because he wants to be so anonymous. And much like the White Lotus, I don't know if you watch that, but when they were in Thailand, a big draw to that was that basically like bad people go there and nobody asks questions and you could just live anonymously. So that's kind of the way Vincent lives. But it seems like he's just so chatty and he's immediately challenging.
Well, so I always think about, which is one of the many reasons I love Pulp Fiction, but the throwaway thing at the very beginning where they're talking and then they're like, let's get in a character. And then you get the opening sequence. I'm always fascinated by that because you
Mhm.
always think about the idea of you give a character of a killer and you wonder, is he that way because that's the person he needs to be to do the job that he is, but he really does want to talk to people. And this way, Max in some ways opens him up. But I think that the jazz club scene is really a great scene for that reason.
Yeah.
And that you're seeing him talk about something he's actually passionate about, and he seems to really be engaging with this guy, and they're having a good time. And then you just kind of watch the veil go over, and this is a good acting job, but by
Yeah.
Tom Cruise in a way. It's like he almost realizes he's letting himself go too far, and then he just shuts it down, and you see the eyes just go dead, and
Yeah.
it's like the flick of a switch, and those two sides of himself are warring, and I think that whether or not that's how he really is, but I think there's something about Max that is almost bringing that out of him, and it's an impulse he's trying to fight.
That's a good point because Michael Mann says that each of these guys is the self-realization of the other. And I'm trying to think about really what that means. And I don't know what it means for Vincent other than maybe Max is just so normal that he gives Vincent the freedom to be normal in a way. But Vincent really just makes Max step up, like we talked about with the life coaching, like sort of inadvertently. He really brings Max to life. And that's great. I mean, that feels like the point of the movie in a way.
Yeah, and this or the scene with the mother, which seems like a throwaway scene, isn't throwaway at all because that I think is the part where I think where Michael Mann's quote comes into play. Where I think he sees that he sees kind of the relationship that he has with his mother, even that he has one, and I think that almost changes something in Vincent, and
Yeah.
that's also why I think he doesn't kill him in the scene right after that.
Right.
Um, so things start to get a little confusing from that point on.
What I thought was interesting in that scene is that Vincent told Max's mother his real name, if it's his real name, I don't know, but what he goes by. So, and previously he had given aliases. So I don't know what that means other than he's becoming more human, maybe,
Right.
or he longs for that. Uh, Sort of a big theme of the film is like disconnection. And, he cites that immediately, kind of comes around again at the end. And
Right,
I think
the subway.
he's,
It was a bit heavy-handed, I have to
yeah,
say,
of
but
course.
it's fine.
But I think he longs for that connection. And the irony is that he's so disconnected. As much as he gripes about disconnection, he's like part of the problem.
Right.
And I think he's just really trying to connect. Like against his better judgment, like he can't help himself from connecting. I mean, this has a very similar theme to most Michael Mann films, which is like lonely guy focused on his job, and comes across somebody who is almost an adversary, but really isn't that different. There were a lot of scenes in this, one in particular where, actually at the end, where Jamie Foxx sits down on the subway next across from Vincent, reminded me so much of the diner scene in Heat when Vincent and Neil sit down across from one another. And there's just so much of that in these Michael Mann films. And the like Miami Vice is the same thing. You have these two guys focused on their work. The villains basically different, but they share a lot in common. So yeah, I think that's just Vincent falls into that trope of a Michael Mann film
Yeah.
very much.
So, I guess what I want to talk about next, talk about the things we love about it. So, once we get to the club, in my opinion,
Fever.
yeah, right. I feel like the movie starts to teeter a little bit for me from that point on. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. So I think the club scene, the second to last murder, I mean, I know it's supposed to be chaotic and confusing, which is fine for me. But I feel like that scene goes on a little too long, but I also feel like it's confusing in a way that doesn't need to be. I mean, first of all, you have a witness who you now know is in the crosshairs of someone. And yet they decided to let this ride and let him sit in the middle of a club, in the middle of a table, which he can't
Yeah.
even get out of, which makes
Yeah.
no sense to me. I mean, but even besides that, the whole sequence where someone comes into the room with a gun, it's like I'm trying to figure out who that even is, like where all these gunmen come from around his table. But even more so than that, where are the cops when Vincent ends up with a clean shot at this guy alone? Where is everybody? The cops were converging. I don't understand how everyone disappears in that exact moment. It feels like that only happens in a movie. It
Yeah.
it 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 kind of bugged me, and that was the beginning of when things start to teeter in terms of plot for me in this movie. And we'll get to the
Right.
next part, but that part was really strange to me for someone as meticulous as Mann is. It felt unrealistic how that all unfolds.
That's interesting. A couple things about that scene for me is, yeah, I said the same thing to Laura when we were watching it last night, that this guy is like testifying for the state the next day in like a cartel case
And
out at a club.
gunshots are going off, and yet no one decides to try to pull him out of the chair until the last minute. It's like he should have already been out of the chair. Like, what is he doing sitting in there?
What I find funny is like when when Max calls Jada Pinkett's Annie on the phone, you see the clock on the phone, and it's like almost 5 a.m. So you figure that club scene took place like a half hour before. This guy, I don't know what time this guy has to testify in the
Right.
morning, but it's like 4:30 already. And how is this dude going to roll into the courthouse? I mean, he's not going to look good, but there he is. Um, I really like that scene a lot because I think they do a great job with the cinematography of building tension.
Yeah, that's my problem. I love it as a moviegoer in terms of how
Right.
it looks and the way it unfolds, but in terms of how it feeds the plot,
Yeah.
it feels like a scene that a movie has to have rather than a scene that makes sense in the movie, I guess is the way to put it.
So you mentioned like who are these gunmen, and I figured out that there are like 4 factions. So there are Peter Lim's security, the guys all surrounding him. There are
Right,
uh,
Felix sends someone. That's
Felix's
who it is.
team,
Felix
yeah,
says to send guys, and if Vincent fails, to kill him. Right, right.
right.
So that's who
And
that is.
then there's the LAPD, and there are the feds, and then there's Vincent and Max. So what I love is there's this huge convergence onto this Peter Lim character, and they do such a great job. This whole scene was shot on film. Oddly enough, like I mean, because it was such a dark room, you would think that it would be a little too dark, and the sensor would be better on a digital camera. But Mann said he shot the whole thing on film. Um, and just the way it's cut is great. The music, I really love it. But you're right, it does fall apart. And even before that, for me, the reason it falls apart is because there's one gunshot fired initially, and of this entire club full of people, it finds the kneecap of Bruce McGill.
Right.
And I'm like, of all the people in this club, and how does it hit the ground? Like that low on the dance floor, it hits the one guy who's a Fed in the kneecap. And from there, I'm like, okay, what the hell? But
So,
yeah,
so
I'm
to
with you.
me, that's when it becomes a slightly different movie. So from the club scene, it starts to teeter a bit, and then you get, like I said, one of my favorite scenes, the scene of the cab where the two of them, almost lay all their cards on the table, which I think is a wonderful scene. But then you get the overturning of the cab, and Vincent becoming superhuman and getting out of the cab when he wasn't wearing a seatbelt with no issues at all. He seems to be more or less perfectly fine. He went to the Gerard Butler School of pain management, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is gonna be a joke forever. That's gonna be the go-to joke for the rest of the pod. Anyway,
yeah,
so he goes to the Gerard Butler School of Pain Management, gets right out of the cab, starts walking. I don't know. That's pretty amazing. And from that sequence on, where Max realizes what's happening and starts to go. I like the scene, and we know that it's building to this, but that scene, that whole sequence is like 30 minutes.
yeah.
I think it drags on a bit, and I understand what they're trying to do, and they're really trying to drag out the tension, and it's a
Mhm.
slow burn, and there's a couple of shots in all of these sequences at the end that are amazing, particularly where Max is outside the building on the phone, and we see
Yeah.
Vincent inside, and that shot is fantastic. Like this, I love it in a lot of ways, but it kind of drags for me, and it just starts to feel it starts to lose me a little bit towards the end. And then the very ending scene where it's hard for me to figure out how a person who clearly has never shot a gun before versus a trained assassin are both shooting each other through a subway door.
Yeah.
And Vincent hits nothing and Max hits him right in the chest. And when Max was standing right there, it's
Yeah.
like I I have a hard time accepting that that is how that would have unfolded, but it's fine. It's a movie, but yeah, for someone who I'm expecting to be hyper realistic in what they do and meticulous, it it it
Yeah.
it feels a bit off for me. It just does.
He should have been shot at least, whether it's like a mortal wound or not. Who knows? But yeah, I agree with you completely. And maybe it's like referencing Pulp Fiction again. Maybe it's that divine intervention that like
Right.
Jules and Vincent had. So I don't know, but yeah, that whole final scene, that whole sequence, to me, it turns into a horror movie. Like Tom Cruise is basically a horror monster from the point when he gets that axe to like chop down the phone line in that building. He just becomes like this unkillable, unstoppable machine. And I really enjoy that actually. Was it
Like I said, I
slow?
like it.
Absolutely.
You're right. I
Yeah.
agree with this. So I'm watching. I like it, but then when it goes on 5 minutes too long, my mind starts to drift, and that's a bad sign. Like I don't want my mind to be drifting at all. The other thing,
Yeah.
by the way, on a total side thing, in the office building when Vincent throws the chair through the window through the
Yeah.
glass, do you think it was an accident that he trips on the chair, or do you think that was
Yes.
on purpose?
It was an accident
Okay,
that Michael Mann really liked. And that was Tom Cruise, of course. It
right. I
wasn't
had I had a
some
feeling
guy.
that
Yeah.
because I do love it, and I'm like it would be impossible to plan that way. So okay,
Yeah, but he really takes a hard
yeah.
fall. So I'm surprised he wanted to leave that in. Yeah, I
Well,
don't
I
know,
mean,
but
we've seen Tom Cruise hurt himself worse on movies. I mean, the scene where he breaks his ankle in Mission Impossible
that's
6 is
true.
still in that movie. So
Yeah, that's true. Uh, yeah, I don't have too much else to say about this unless you do.
I got a couple of things.
Yeah.
Uh, First, I love that he's so crazy, Michael Mann, that he even like picked out the exact color what the cabs were supposed to look like,
Mhm.
which is another thing that's just insane to me. Uh, the other thing, I was really obsessed with when he first propositions Max and fans out the $600.
Yes.
That is so perfectly done. I wonder how much he practiced that before he was able to just so casually like fan out $600 in his hand. So cool. It really is cool. I'm
It was
sorry.
like 6 hours a day for 2 months is what
Yeah,
I read.
it's
No,
just
I'm just
pretty
kidding.
cool.
But the best part of that is the sound. Like, I don't know if you heard the sound, but it's
Yeah,
like and yeah,
I love it.
perfect.
Really love it.
Yeah.
Um, One other thing, what I noticed, and only because I've actually been to LA now, when I saw that the gas was $1.83, I almost passed out.
Yeah.
Like in 2004, gas was only $1.83 because in 2022 it was $6. Like,
Ooh,
yeah,
even that's low from when I've been there.
it was
Yeah.
like $6.50. It's more than that.
Yeah.
So I can't believe gas was ever that low in California.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep. That's really wild. I didn't even notice that, but
Oh, I definitely noticed that because I'm a grown man now with kids. I'm always looking at gas prices everywhere I go. Like
oh yeah.
this has become my obsession. That and
Yeah.
who's parking in front of my house. But that's neither here nor there. These are the things that you suddenly start thinking about when you get old. I don't know why. The one other thing, Michael Mann clearly likes Audio Slave,
I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to get your thoughts on
and
this.
I love Soundgarden, which is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I
Same.
love Rage Against the Machine, probably another of my favorite bands of all time.
Mhm.
Never really thought Audio Slave worked, like, and I thought it was something to give almost a music video sequence
With the wolf,
to
yeah.
a full Audio Slave song and then come back to it a little bit later on. It actually plays in the background of another scene a little bit down the road.
Yeah.
And so Michael Mann is great at picking scripts, and I'm not necessarily sure he's great at picking bands. I'm not really sure who decided Audio Slave was the perfect mix for that, but that's just me.
It's not just you. I was thinking about it as we watched, and Laura's like, "Oh, is that Chris Cornell?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's Audio Slave." And what I realized is like I know it was like Tom Morello was in that band, right?
It was all the members of Rage Against the Machine except
Okay.
the lead singer with the lead singer
Well,
of Soundgarden.
what I realize is that for me, and I mean this is a separate pod, and we can do this all day, but like in Soundgarden, the musicians were so good that Cornell was like one of four components. And to me, Audio Slave is like Chris Cornell is a selling point, and the music behind him is like whatever. And that's why for me, like I never got into them because it just sounded so bland to me. It didn't even have like the excitement of the Rage Against the Machine stuff, which was pretty new at the time and different than most stuff. But this is just like blah. Put Chris Cornell over top of it.
Yeah. There's
And
only a
I
couple
really
of
hated it.
songs where Audio Slave reached the height of both of the bands that they were in before. There's like three
Yeah,
songs they
man.
made, and this is someone who actually owned all three Audio Slave albums. Don't ask me why. I bought a lot of CDs in the early 2000s. What can I say? Um, there's like three songs that I go back to that I really really like that they made, and Like a Stone is not one of them.
Yeah, I was going to say this can't be one of them because I just found it to be super boring. And yeah, it doesn't fit. I mean, there's so many different options you could have had in that moment. And, but man really leaned into it. I mean, listening to him talk about it,
Yeah,
he loves them.
and he uses Audio Slave again in Miami Vice, if you remember.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
clearly he loves him some Audio Slave.
Man. Why not buy one Rage Against the Machine song, one Soundgarden song, and have two songs like at their
Because I'll
peak
tell you
instead
what,
of
if you're going for like a dirge kind of song, on Super Unknown, there's a song called "4th of July," which is one of my favorites.
so good.
You
Yeah.
could use that song because that low guitar, like that low tune guitar dirge in that song, is so effective, and
Yeah.
I could hear that playing over that sequence. It's so menacing, and that's kind of if you're going for that feel, but that's neither here nor there.
We could do a separate Soundgarden podcast. But yeah, so pick better music, Michael Mann. Uh, I think, unless you have anything else, we'll talk about the numbers real quick because there's some interesting takes on this. Very, very well received from critics and audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. I think last week, Night and Day was like 51-48 or something. This is 86-84. That's very, very good. That's a high B. 3.9 on Letterboxd, which is also very high. So people really like this film, and with good reason. That might have been a 4 if Audio Slave weren't on there.
Yeah. See, to me, I think the first hour and 20 minutes of this movie is like 4.5 stars. And I think the last, 35 minutes to me is like 3.5 stars. It just kind of drops a little bit. It loses me a little bit. But the opening, the first hour and 20 minutes are so strong that I find myself watching it regardless of how it ends.
Yeah, it was really fun to revisit. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and just the digital video thing. I don't know how that sits with me, but the cinematography is great. Like the digital video allows you to really like lengthen the depth of field, so you get a lot of great foreground, background stuff, almost like the way Citizen Kane looked. I mean, that's a crazy comparison, but like the overlay of film in that really creates the effect that you can get with a digital video because of the sensor. Neither here nor there. So back to the numbers. The budget on this was $65 million. It's a pretty modest budget. I can't imagine what that would have been if they used film. That would have been like $100 million. But gross $220 million, which is pretty respectable. So 2004, $220 million is nothing to sneeze at. And again, that's that Tom Cruise allure at the height of that,
right.
that heater he's on, and just embrace it because this is the last time you're going to see that for like 10 years. So it's kind of crazy. But yeah, overall, I mean, we both love this film. So definitely worth watching. I'll point out that I watched it on this new 4K that Paramount released recently, and it's a beautiful transfer. So
I will point out that I own it on the old double disc plain ass DVD that I bought like in 2009 or something that I still have.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah,
maybe we should do a month where we're just like, we each pull 2 things from our collection to talk about, like at random or something.
That wouldn't bother me any. Because again, I'm going back and rewatching old films with my son now, trying to show him the classics. He asked me, his friends told him he should watch The Wolf of Wall Street. And I told him there's zero chance he's ever watching Wolf of Wall Street until he's watched Goodfellas. Like there's just no chance. There's no place in the universe where you watch Wolf of Wall Street first. So
yeah, that's a good call. That's good parenting.
And actually what's brought this up too is I'm not really sure, maybe because it's, a quarter into the century, everybody's making their lists now of top movies of the 2000s. I mean, the 2020s, you've seen this, right?
The New York Times is doing it.
But then there's also another place that did another one as well, like the top 25 movies the last 25 years. So I guess people are piggybacking on it. I guess because we're 25 years in, the retrospectives are coming in. So I was going through that list with him, and he's picking out movies he's never seen before, like There Will Be Blood and things like that. So I think we're gonna start watching some of these things.
Yeah, that's good, man. I did one of those for the New York Times, and my list is a little strange, but I'm
sure
happy
it is. I'm sure.
I really put a lot of thought into it. Like I need to get female directors in there. I need to represent certain things, and I don't know if it's like an accurate list, but I'm pretty happy with it, I have to say. Maybe the only person who has Under the Skin in their top 10 films of the century.
I'm almost positive that's true.
Yeah. Hey, I like what I like. All right, well, that's it for Collateral then. I think we've said all we need to say about it. Definitely check it out. Thumbs up, it holds up, even though the digital video might not. So let's move on to what we watched this week.
Yeah. What did we watch this week? So I went to the theater and watched 28 Years Later.
Okay.
which we talked about last week. I wanted to check
Mhm.
it out. And I realized, of course, that I probably should have watched 28 Days Later before I watched 28 Years Later. It's been a
Yeah.
long time.
Right.
And
Well, they're on Paramount or Peacock now, I think.
yeah. And what I also didn't realize is that this story is going to continue. And so that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So I wasn't aware that this is kind of a reboot of the franchise.
It's going to be a
Um,
trilogy.
yeah. So I came out of it learning all these things. Like I just kind of went into it blind and watched it. It was effective. I mean, a different kind of movie. I think that it's hard to figure out how to tell zombie stories anymore that are interesting in a lot of ways. And I think this did a pretty good job because it almost really focused so much less now. We're well past the point that these zombies exist. And it's more just about how people are living in this world now. And I thought in that way it was pretty effective.
What did you think of the cinematography? Because I mentioned last week some of the little things, the little flourishes that Anthony Dodd Mantle does that maybe didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. I mean, I thought it was interesting. I thought that it was definitely some interesting choices. I mean,
Mhm.
and I don't know if the idea is you're supposed to notice them, and if you are, then good job. But if you're not, then it's poorly done. So it's hard to say. But if the
It's
idea is you're
hard to
trying to
not notice.
jar people with the choices that you're making and make them obvious, then yeah, good, because that's exactly what you did.
Did you see what I meant about how they would get a hit and then like it would tilt the
Like
camera?
video game stuff, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. Again, that's a choice, and it definitely noticed it. I don't know how much I loved it, but I hadn't necessarily seen it before.
Mhm.
So I was like, "Oh, that's something."
Yeah.
But you're right. I have no idea how much I liked it because anytime something tilts too much and I feel like a video game for me, I don't love that. That's you know, it's
I
not
wish
my
they were
jam.
more consistent. Yeah. But, I think it's interesting to try that. But how do you maintain that through 2 hours? Like there are going to be so many kills. You want every zombie kill to be like, oh, the camera shifts. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, whatever. So maybe the only maybe the only zombie movie I can think of with like full frontal male nudity in a big way.
I'll say, I guess because it's 28 years later, all the clothes disintegrated. So I guess that's fair. I'm just not sure I needed all that. I also
Yeah.
not sure
Wow.
I needed to see a zombie birth, but that's fine.
Man. Yeah.
Because this is a lot. It's a lot going on with seeing births. Because I watched The Pit, so it's like that's it's a lot of births on screen now. Some
Yeah. Oh
again
boy.
because of technology, you can do a lot of things you couldn't do before.
Yeah. We are definitely past the Hays Code
Yeah.
at this point. Did you watch anything else that you want to mention?
No, I've been trying to finish up Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV because
Uh,
I was trying to finish that before The Bear and Squid Game dropped. So it's kind of a lot of TV right now.
I got sucked into the bear this week and didn't get to bed until like 3 a.m. the last 2 nights because I just could not stop watching it. And by and large, the reviews are not great of it. I mean, it seems to have diminishing returns as the seasons go on, but
Yeah,
I really love
I
it.
personally think that has my little soapbox on this. I think it has more to do with the audience than it does with the show itself.
I
Because I
agree.
think that at the end of the day, it's a sitcom, right? And I think
Yep.
that people tend to forget that's what it is. And so the sitcom, the only measure of a sitcom is do you want to spend time with these characters
Yeah.
and do you enjoy being with them? That's all a sitcom is. It's a hang. That's not what a drama is necessarily. That's definitely what sitcoms are. So I think people are expecting something different from a sitcom than what it's supposed to be. Once became a huge hit and it's going to continue, it's not going to be as fast paced as the first season. The first season was the first season of a show that we weren't sure was going to last. And now that it's going to last, you have to pace it now, but you also have to just enrich the depth of the characters. So you either love
Yeah.
them or you don't. And not me personally, I like these characters and I like spending time with them. So I never feel bored or annoyed by the show.
Right.
I'm okay with all of it, but some people obviously don't feel that way.
The other thing is that it's, that first season was very much contained in that restaurant, in that kitchen. And I mean, that's the nature of television. You have to like widen that aperture and bring in other characters and
Right.
focus on them. And that's just the way it works.
Right.
And for my money, so far, season 4 is fantastic. I really, really like it.
Yeah, I didn't even dislike season 3. I mean, and it's we call this the lost principle that you're almost doomed by making a perfect first season in a lot of
Right.
ways. It's impossible to replicate a perfect first season.
Yeah. But TV just can't do it. But I recommend sticking with it because I think it's fantastic. What did I see? Went to see Megan 2.0.
No.
Yeah, I did. Like in a preview too, not even opening night. I was all in.
Wow.
And it's basically Terminator 2. You have the bad guy from the first one coming back as a good guy to protect the hero against an even worse villain.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's really all it is. Some interesting points about AI in it, but
I feel like I'm going to stick with Terminator 2. I just think I'm going to roll with that one.
if you have your choice, definitely go with Terminator 2 10 out of 10 times.
Okay.
But if you have a weekend to kill and you want to watch something goofy, go see Megan 2.0. The villain, well, no, I shouldn't say anything. I don't want to spoil it. But the other thing I saw was Jurassic World Rebirth.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you think about that because I'm almost positive I'm going to take my youngest to go see that because we saw the trailer and he seemed super into it.
So this is the first Jurassic Park film I've seen since the first one because I have no interest in dinosaurs. I have no interest in a Spielbergian tone about anything. And so for me, it's just like I'm out from basically day one. I can see why people are going to just flock to theaters to watch this. It's fun. It's a popcorn movie that will inevitably make at least $500 million almost instantly. Not my cup of tea, but for the masses who love dinosaurs, they're going to love this. I think it's from what I know about a lot of the things that follow the first Jurassic Park. This one's a little fresher, and it's some of it's set in a city, and this is like the 28 years later of Jurassic Park, where the all this time has passed, and and maybe this was the case in some of the other Jurassic Park films. I don't know, but it opens with a dinosaur in New York City. It's kind of like hanging out. So I don't know if that's happened in the past, but
I don't know. I didn't watch any of the Jurassic World movies.
Yeah, it's just not appealing
I just
to
felt
me.
like that was a reboot that I didn't need in my life.
I will say in this, I don't know the actor's name, but he's the guy who plays the scientist, and he has these really shiny silver-rimmed glasses. This guy falls off a mountain, falls off a boat, all these things, and those glasses never leave his face. It is like a feat of gravity that these glasses are permanently stuck to this dude's face. Scarlett Johansson feels like she is having the time of her life, not necessarily doing a lot of serious acting, but having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like Scarlett Johansson, and I really like Mahershala Ali, obviously. And when I saw him in the trailer, I'm like, I think maybe I'll go back for this one. Maybe I'll check this one out. Why not?
He's very much like Han Solo, like that's kind of his role in this, like with kind of a kinder heart in a way. But yeah, if you have kids, for sure, take them to see it if they have any interest in dinosaurs. Again, not necessarily my thing, but even I sat through it and was like, oh, I can see why people would like this. I'll never watch it again, or I probably won't see the next one. But this was the AMC Screen Unseen this week. So I would have never bought a ticket to this. I just happened to be thrust upon me. So I sat and watched it.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for another episode. Next week is a new month, and we're starting a new theme. And, it's summer. It's hot. It's like 100 degrees here this week. And we're going to talk about summer films. That would be a lot of fun to discuss.
Right, but not movies that come out in the summer, not summer blockbusters.
Right.
Summer movies is in movies that take place in the summer.
Summer set films. And we're going to start with one that, spoiler alert, we both really like. I'm very excited about this. I went out and bought the Blu-ray today. Summer School from, I think, 1987. So yeah, join us for that next week when we start summer month with Summer School. We will see you then. So long. As always, thanks for listening to the Weekly Movie Throwdown. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And for even more from us, visit moviethrowdownpod.com or connect with us on social media. We're Movie Throwdown on Letterboxd and at Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere else.